Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Dream, and you are here for an episode of Psychedelics as Medicine. Favorite topic of mine. My guest today has been a previous guest on my other podcast, the DMT Chronicles. But he really had to kind of fine tune his experiences. Although he touched on other things other than DMT, I referred to him in that as calling him a psychonaut would be like kind of an understatement for the well-roundedness and the depth of who he is, and also the depth of where he goes with everything that he does. Our first point of contact was he saw me do a performance of our healing and speaking event back in 2010 at Lightning in a Bottle. He interviewed me in 2012 for a documentary he did called Cosmic Giggle. And in 2019, we were both part of the Portal to Ascension event in Orange County, California. And now I think we both feel like it's come full circle to these discussions, and I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some collaboration, if not just some personal exploration for the two of us together in the near future. But I'm looking forward to actually both of those, personal exploration and a collaboration of some sort. I believe that his perspective is incredibly valuable, and that's why I wanted him for both of the podcasts. And I have a deep respect for him, and I could go on and on, as you know I do sometimes, but I'd much rather listen to him speak. His name is Michael Armstrong. Michael, welcome to Psychedelics as Medicine.
Thanks, Dr. Dream. Thanks for the amazing intro again. And yeah, I'm feeling this in general now. This kind of a lot of my relationships are getting to this place where it's like it's spiritual and there's work and there's friendship. And it's just kind of like these boundaries that we put on the roles we play kind of melting away. And it's like, oh, we're all just living all the facets of life together. So yeah, really lovely to feel that with you.
I'm pretty sure in other timelines concurrently with this timeline, we're hanging out, doing all sorts of things. Also, there's no mistakes about when we come into contact with each other. And I'm sure we've experienced some other fun rodeos. This is not our first one. And so, but it's a treat for me. I loved our conversation that we got to have for the DMT Chronicles. And it was just sort of tip of the iceberg. And so I'm appreciative of you coming back and making time again that we can kind of dig down into that iceberg a little bit more and see what else is there. So as you know from our first interview, I really like to just sort of cut the reins and say, okay, let's just freeform it and go wherever it needs to go. So here you are, here I am. Let's go for it.
Awesome. Let's go for it. Okay, cool. Yeah, where to start? As you were talking, I was like, okay, how far back in my life story do I want to go to to open this? Because I feel like yeah, there's been, I remember as a kid really feeling like wanting there to be magic so bad, and then hitting this point, it was like this time there wasn't like a specific moment, but it was around, like fifth grade, kind of going into middle school, where it's like, oh, magic isn't real. And I just remember feeling this like letdown with that of it's like, oh, this reality is kind of bleak, and is this all there is? Like that feeling just sort of settled in, like as I started to hit that age. And but there was always like something in me that was like, but like what if, like what if there's some like doorway, like a secret door somewhere, like into this, like, these things I experienced through like fantasy books and stuff like that. And then as time went by, I started to like learn about psychedelics and read people like Rick Strassman from DMT, The Spirit Molecule, Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, like all these kinds of people. And it was like, oh, there is something, there is a magic to this world. that I started to feel. And then I started to feel it energetically through some non-psychedelic experiences. And I was like, oh, there's something that's more alive than this like dead reality that is the mainstream culture. And then I think it was like really psychedelic started to open me from the rave scene. Well, I guess it was marijuana first. That was my first like, and now looking back, some of my early experiences with ganja were so psychedelic, just like so trippy. And then it wasn't like that. After the first 2 years, it kind of became not so like that. It wasn't such like intense visuals and like, being paralyzed and things like that, like it was at the beginning. Um, but then I started to go to raves and I was just like interested in exploring. I just happened to meet some friends who were like really into going to raves when I moved to LA. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a really cool scene. And started having experiences with MDMA. And the MDMA experiences were really like that that really like opened my heart. And that was really, there was something that cracked open in me then that was like my view of the world before that had gotten pretty ingrained like through high school. And I went to like an elite private high school and that was very so then the reason I say that is like the intellectual programming of the worldview of scientific materialism was like extra strong, you know. And through that, it was like I took on an identity of like I'm a smart person and like I understand things, and there's this kind of intellectual arrogance that can emerge in that kind of world. And so there was like an extra thick layer that had to be kind of broken for me. And then I started to have these rave experiences and these experiences on MDMA where it was just like, wow, like I can feel total bliss and not just total bliss, but this like mind expanding, like I'm getting like visions of the future and like see it's just like it's trippy, but it's also just like just so expanding my world and my sense of like what reality is. And this feeling of like love with people. There's something about the rave scene that's different than just doing MDMA, which is very powerful in other settings and with therapists and stuff. But in the rave, and it's something too where it's like there's a playfulness to the rave scene, or at least the way it was back then, where it was like everybody's kind of experimenting of like, oh, what if we do this? Will that feel good? What if we like massage each other? What if we get some Vicks vapor rub and like smell that? Like that's cool, you know? And so it's like there's this like, oh, kind of returning to this like childhood innocence of like open-heartedness of it's like, oh, we're all just kids like playing and like loving each other. We all want to be like touched and loved and like feel good vibrations. So that really, and there was a sense, like a strong sense that I got from those experiences where I was like, there's something in me that knows that this like peak experience at a rave, it's possible for this to be like the baseline experience for humanity. And that there's one day we won't need substances to do this. Like our bodies will just be attuned to this way of being. So then after that, this is like 2009, I had like what I would call like a spontaneous spiritual awakening. Although it wasn't spontaneous because it was like, all of this MDMA experiences were building up to it. But I was on vacation with my parents, like at a beach house in North Carolina. And I happened to, I read Albert Hoffman's book about LSD. And there's a documentary called Water, the Great Mystery, which was made by the same people who made What the Bleep Do We Know? And I watched that film and I read that book, and something about those two pieces of information just like clicked into my mind, and it just like opened the geometry of my consciousness. And this like flood of realization came into me. And it was this like overwhelming feeling, like an intellectual understanding, but an overwhelming body feeling of like everything in the universe is alive and it's conscious, and consciousness is the substrate of everything, and it's made of love, and we're all like woven out of this. And like water is like somehow like the memory vehicle for all of this happening. And it just hit me like so hard. And I like tried to talk about it with my parents and they didn't get it at all. And I just like ran to the beach and just like swam and swam and swam like so far out in the water. I'm like sobbing tears. And I'm just like getting this like intense downloads. And there's also this very, very strong feeling as this is happening that I'm like, this is enlightenment, which is happening to me right now. And this is actually our normal state. This is like the normal way
Right.
that Should be. And this is like what all the sages of the past realized, like Jesus and Buddha and Joan of Arc and all these people. This is what they realized. They touched this and they tried to like remind everybody that this is what normal is supposed to feel like. And and then all of history unfolds. And there was also such a profound sense of like, now I'm at step one. Like I've been at step zero for my whole life before this, and now it's starting. Like now the journey is actually starting. And I was like, okay, I don't know what any of this means, but like, here we go. Like, let's step into the future. And so, interestingly, that whole year that I was going to raves, I had, been so interested, fascinated by LSD as a concept. And like, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Similar to what I was saying in the DMT podcast, there was like an LSD drought that year. And it's funny. I talked to I met someone at a rave, and it was funny because I was asking people for acid every time I would go to a rave. Nobody had it. And then at some point, I shaved a mohawk. And when I had a mohawk, people would ask me for acid. It was like that's the code apparently. They were like, that guy has But I met this woman who said she was like, oh, some lab that made a lot of LSD got busted. And so like the supply chain of LSD has been interrupted for like this time period. But it was like perfect because I realized that I needed to have that like awakening moment. And I don't like the word awakening because it's a process and because it wasn't like there's not a before and after. It's like, okay, it's a gradual thing. But I needed to have that experience first before having like a deep LSD experience. And so right after that, I went to Electric Daisy Carnival, which was still in LA at that point. I hadn't gone to Vegas yet. And which at that point it was at the sports arena in
Yeah.
LA, which was walking distance from my house where I lived on the USC campus. So I could just like walk to the rave and then like walk home. Like it was so nice. And went there, had an LSD experience. Don't need to go into all the details of that, but it was, there was kind of a dark moment. But then I went with a friend of mine and we kind of walked up like really high in the bleachers, and there was some sort of there was like a sound issue happening on the main stage, and it was just quiet for a long time. And so we got a chance to just sit high up in the bleachers, and I told my friend like all of these things I was realizing, and he was on MDMA, or we were both on acid, and it was just like communicating between us, and I could feel him like seeing it and understanding it. And wow, I'm gonna get a little emotional telling this. Then there was this moment where the music came on and Benny Benassi playing. And the first song that he played was a remix of Rock With You by Michael Jackson. And there is this moment where, and I told my friend this whole thing, and I'm like telling him like everything is made of love and we're all interconnected and like consciousness is the fabric of reality. And then the music starts playing and everybody in the whole stadium stands up and starts dancing, and there's this like love wave that just like lifts like over the people. And I look down and I can feel every single person in the stadium, and I'm like, wow, we're all like one body, you know. And it's like, oh, wow, all this stuff I realized now, it's like now I'm feeling it viscerally like in my flesh. And it was just, and then the whole rest of the experience was just so beautiful. It was just this like swimming in the love ocean of that. And then it stayed with me for so long. It just like stayed in my body for like so long after that. And so that was a really profound opening. And then this same friend, um, so that's this next part is like a real defining chapter of my life. So the same friend then invites me and a group of other people to come and do LSD at his house, like just maybe a month after that. This is like summertime in LA between semesters at USC. And uh, so to now I'm going to pause on that and rewind a little bit. Um, I've had a series of dreams throughout my life that are like have are qualitatively different from like all of the other dreams I've had. Like less than five probably. And all of them have the same characteristic where it's like a complete narrative arc from beginning to end, and it starts and it's like this is a whole journey, hyper vivid, realistic, crystal clear, and it like feels like I'm being like shown something. It's just like this is not just information from my subconscious like being processed. It's like this is like I'm being delivered like a message. And the first time this happened was it was when I was college visiting, and I was traveling with my dad, and we were staying in Boston. And I had this dream, and I forgot it when I woke up, and then later in the day, I suddenly remembered it, and it like popped fully back into my mind. And in this dream, um, it's the end of the world. That's the other thing about all these dreams. They're all in the death realm. It's like after the world has ended, or I've died, or something like that. That's all always the framing. And in this dream, it's like end of the world, like biblical judgment day, like red mountain of stone, but like black lake. The sky is dark. It's like raining fire and brimstone, like biblical judgment day. And all of the people are in this line, like in a queue line, like snaking around the edge of this mountain. And I just there's all these things in this dream that are just like an innate knowing where I'm like, I know that it's the end of the world. Like it's fire and brimstone, but I'm not afraid. And like, no, but none of the people are afraid. It's like, we're just lining up to like go through whatever process is happening. And I have this innate sense that it's like, we're dead and we have the powers of God. There's just like this knowing that that was there. And we come up and there's like a podium and a giant angel that's like, it's so on the nose. It's like this giant angel like sending people to heaven and hell. And I come up to the podium and I know that I'm gonna like be sent to heaven, but I ask the angel, I'm like, can you show me what hell is? And it shows me, and it's like the people who are going to hell, it's this, they also have the powers of God, but are like go into this black void where they're like floating and they can't figure out how to use their powers. And they're just like frustrated and like bouncing around and like just kind of stuck in this like fetal state, like not realizing like what power they actually have to leave that situation. And then we come back and then we go to heaven, and the only difference between heaven and hell in this reality is that heaven is like a safe practice room to learn how to use the God powers. And I'm with like a bunch of people from my life at that time, and we're in this room, and it kind of looks like a squash court. It's like all like white walls and like a white floor, and it's this and like really high walls that go up, and I look up and there's an empty ceiling, like it's just an opening to like this night. And I have this again, an innate knowing that it's like we're in like a kind of school or like a practice room, and the graduation, like they're like we'll know that we're graduated from this when we can fly, when we go out of the room. And then we start kind of playing with these God powers, and I'm like, and it's cool, and I'm like, I can visualize something and focus, and then like make like an object appear, like a sphere or like a simple little block or something like that. But it's very clumsy, and then I can kind of fly a little bit. Like if I run, I can sort of like float for a few feet, like along the ground. And it's this feeling of like, it feels like we're in kindergarten. It feels like a bunch of kindergartners like playing with God powers. Like that's the sense of it. And I'm like, okay, this is fun. Like this is cool. We're all like learning together, but it's going really slow and it's like kind of stagnant. And then I have this realization and I'm like, oh, if we have the powers of God, what if I point that at myself and I actually use that power to go into my own consciousness and like hack my own like being and my own perception. And as soon as I have that thought, it switches, and then I'm like in a computer room. I'm like sitting on a chair, and there's this like wall of screens in front of me, and I'm like hacking myself. I'm like hacking my own mind. And I don't really like see what happens in that part, but there's this feeling of like when I do that, then the whole thing starts to rapidly accelerate. And this like hyper accelerated learning starts happening. And it's just like and it kind of reaches this crescendo. And then when it peaks, like everybody jumps and we fly out of the top of the room and like soar into an empty universe. And there's just an empty, infinite blackness. And I open my chest and like it's just like infinite life starts like flowing out of my being. And it's like galaxies and planets and plants and animals and rivers. It's just like endless like flow of creativity just like bursting out of my body. And then I woke up, and that was that was just on Tuesday. But so then fast forwarding, had this experience at LSD, at EDC, and then my friend invites me and this group of other people to come to his house to take acid. And we go, and there's like six of us there, and I didn't have any awareness at the time that LSD can be the same looking little piece of paper and a vastly different dose size. And I think like looking back, I probably like the LSD, I had taken it at the Electric Daisy Carnival. And I think, that I'd been like maybe like a 50 microgram tab, and I probably like took two. And so I had like a, solid 100 microgram dose. And then I'm like at this in my friend's apartment, I'm like, I took two before, I'm ready for three. Let's go. But now, if I had to gauge it, like based on my experience now, I would guess that they were probably like 300 mic tabs. So if like I ended up taking in the range of like 900 micrograms. And this is my second time doing LSD. Yeah. And we, and we show up in my friend's apartment and we're like, yay, we're gonna like, finger paint and like try fruits and like, just we got this like fun like picnic. And and it starts to kick in and like pretty quickly as it starts to kick in, it's like hits all of us. So it's like this is like not this is something else. This is like another level of experience that's starting to happen. And then the fear starts to come in. And most of us were pretty new, not very experienced. I was 20. My friend whose apartment it was is like the guide, and he's like 23, and he's like sold some acid and like done it a handful of times. It's like no one has any idea what they're doing. And it starts to kick on, and my friend who's like guiding us gets completely overwhelmed by the experience. And he falls on the floor crying and starts like screaming that it's like that something else is happening and like this is not a drug, a total freak out, which of course is very stabilizing for the rest of us.
It was our rock.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in retrospect, it was also like the worst tripping environment. It was like it was like a dark apartment with like wall to wall psychedelic posters, of like Jimi Hendrix with the snakes like coming out of his face and like just like everything like super psychedelic. And we're like playing Dark Side of the Moon on the stereo. It's just like everything is just like amplifying the energy like so strongly. And this feeling starts to kick in where it feels like someone is reaching into my brain and squeezing it. And it's like every possible sensation that you can imagine, like knives shooting into my body, then like warm and fuzzy, and then cold, and then like tingling and itching. But it's like a tornado, just like a nonstop tornado of sensation and like information and energy coming through me. And it's not like I've had some bad trips where I've like bad trips. And as a side note, I'm a big believer in like the bad trip is not necessarily bad, and in fact it's like that's where you build strength and you like find things about yourself often. So I don't, bad trip is not a word that I like very much. But in other experiences that I've gone dark, I've like encountered like very dark entities and like kind of horror movie like type stuff. And this was not like that at all, but it was just this feeling of like splintering and like just it's just so overwhelming. Like the feeling of like being in this intense focus and not being able to drop it, like not being able to let go. So it's like really it's like panic inducing, like how overwhelming it is to the point that our whole group is having to just sit on the floor and like hold each other's hands to like get through it. And the what happened next, I have a theory about this, but I don't know for sure. I think that because of the terror, like because of the sheer terror that kicked in, it forced us to like drop all the ego roles and like boundaries, like all these stories of like you're my friend's brother and we like go to school together and like this is your apartment and like all of this layers of like who we are as humans is like we just have to let go of all of that because we're like emotionally in this like desperation and we have to just like hold each other as human beings and like let go of all of that to like get through this like they kick to that level. And at some point as that's happening, I look at my friend whose apartment it is, and we make eye contact, and I can feel it in him. We both realize at the same time that we're having a telepathic experience, but not just like I've said that to people, and I have to clarify, like a complete mind meld, where I'm looking into his eyes, and I can hear his internal dialogue in words. Like I can hear every word that he's thinking. But it's not just like the words, it's like the whole, like he'll think a word like parents, and then I get this whole flash of like all of the emotional associations with that and these like deep meaning like around like what each of these words are. And we both like realize that it's happening at the same time. And we like validate it, like speak out loud. And it's like, did you just think that? Did I just say this? And we're like, yes, yes. And it felt silly to even say it out loud because it was like the mind communication is like more vivid than like what I'm saying with words, you know? And like under other circumstances, it would have been so cool, like so cool to explore that. But we're in this like total fear state, you know? And so we go into this like really, really deep communication, and then we begin having this conversation that nobody else heard. That's like the most intimate form of communication I've ever experienced with another person. And uh, I go in the bathroom at one point, and he's like right there next to me. And I come back outside, and he's like, I was just right next to you in the bathroom. And then we start having this conversation, and we really quickly go to we must be dead because this is not possible. Like this is not possible according to the laws of physics. So we must have left the plane of Earth, like what you were saying about some of those times you've had that. Is like we convinced each other that we were completely gone. And like the experience of it felt like that because it was like everything is just melted into blackness, and all of my friends are like these pillars of light just like existing in like a void. You know, fully is like the experience is like, yep, it feels like we left Earth completely. And um and then in looking back, it's interesting, like I observe about my own psyche, that like how quickly I accepted that reality. Because there's like this kind of period of like fear and like reckoning with it, where and like really for a span of about an hour, my friend and I both like 100% believed that we were never going to see our parents again, that we were never going to go to school, but like nothing from normal life was going to ever exist again in our reality. And I accepted it. I like got comfortable with that. And so I like, and this is part of my also my journey of embodiment. It's like, okay, I gotta like land and like ground here more. Um, and I start to be like, oh, we can like play here. We can like exist in this space. Like, actually, this is like kind of amazing, like what's happening. And then there's this moment where we go out into the hallway for a second. We're kind of feeling like light and like playful. And we go out into the hallway, and there's this feeling when we open the door to the hallway where when I see the hallway, it feels like the atoms like fly into place to meet my imagination. Like it feels like my gaze going onto it is like making it appear and making it real. And I think there's something real to that. There's something quantum physics like about observing in reality and how the wave collapses. There's something like to that. But so then I start to get this feeling of like my mind is creating reality. We go out in the hallway, we turn back, and I start running. And I'm really full of joy. And I run into the apartment, and I see this like light coming through the blinds of the window. And like something clicks in my mind, and I'm like, it's like the moment from my dream, where we've like been in the room, in the white room, and now it's time to fly, and we're gonna like leave the room, and we're gonna like go to the next level. And I run at full speed as fast as I can and vault, like jump off of the couch and dive straight through the glass of the third story window of my friend's apartment. Um, yeah. So, so I'm the guy from the PSAs when they say don't take acid because you jump out a window.
Right.
Yeah. It's a thing. It's a real thing. Um, man. And it's like, it's just, and it's every time I tell this story, there's like a deeper unpacking of it. It's like 15 years later now, and it's like, oh, it's like more, it's just like, I feel like it's just like a lifelong integration of like that, what happened and like that whole thing. Looking back, I'm like, there are for sure spirit guides, helpers that like helped me in the way that I fell. Because I pieced it together later. I went back to the spot and I was like, how did I fall? And I realized what must have happened was that it was like a apartment complex with a pool courtyard. And there's the window, and I must have gone out of the glass and hit this tree branch right outside the window, and then tumbled and fallen straight down into a gap like this wide between the wall of the building and this concrete retaining wall around the pool, and just like fall. And then like my experience in the moment was I go through the glass, and then it like felt weird, like I was like disoriented, like I didn't even expect there to be an outside like past the window, like I thought I was gonna fall in a light or something. I don't know. Like I didn't think I could fly. I thought I was gonna like, transform into a different level of being. Like that's where I was. And so then I'm falling and I'm like, whoa, it feels not like what I thought it was gonna feel like. And then I'm just on my feet and I'm just standing on the ground. I'm barefoot and I'm just on my feet, and I'm just like, okay. And now I'm standing here. I'm unscathed from the fall, except for my hand is completely sliced open. When my hand went through the glass, I sliced open the back of my hand, it completely severed the tendon in my ring finger, half severed it in my middle finger, like 16 stitches and like a bunch on the front. And and then I look down and my hand is cut open and I'm on like 900 micrograms of LSD. This is like 2 hours into the trip. And I'm looking at my hand and it's just like gushing blood, and it's like fractal like waves like in time, like with my heartbeat. And it's like boom,
My
boom,
God.
boom. And it does, the crazy thing is it didn't break the spell. Like I thought that I was still in the mind universe. Like I was like, oh, it didn't go the way I thought, but like we're still, like I was still in that reality. And I'm looking at my hand and I'm like, I can just use my focus and like make my skin go back together. Like this is the mind realm, you know? And I'm staring at my hand like this, like trying to like, will it to like go back together. And just like out of sheer coincidence, it is like summer in like college kid housing. And there's like, I guess a young woman who's moving into her apartment, and her dad, and this is old Asian man, and he comes around the corner and sees me and just runs over, rips his own shirt off, wraps it around my arm, ties it super tight, and then like tourniquets me and like puts pressure to stop the bleeding. He probably saved my life. And and then like I'm still just like shocked and disoriented. People are starting to gather. There's my friends, but then other people in the apartment complex are starting to be like, "Oh my God, call the ambulance!" All this, and I'm still in this state where I'm like, "Ambulance? Like, there's no such thing as an ambulance. Like, we're in a mind realm, you know." And I'm like, "Are these people still? Are they like entering the dimension that we're in? Like, what is happening?" And then like I kind of have this time to like sort of settle, and at one point I black out from the blood loss, and I like slide down on the wall, and I'm sitting there and we're waiting, and I'm just kind of like I'm still just disoriented. And then it's funny too, this little detail happened where another friend of mine had come who wasn't on acid, and I'm still in this like halfway state, and he comes down and like starts whispering in my ear, and he knows the paramedics are coming, and he's like, I broke my leg while I was at a club dancing on ecstasy. And he was like, the healing journey would have been so much more painful. But because I was on ecstasy at the time when it happened, the healing process was so much smoother. And he was like, I have an ecstasy pill here. Would you like to take it? Like before you go to the hospital? And I'm in this state where I'm like, yes, of course. Like, obviously. So I take an ecstasy pill on top of all of this happening. Um, and then the paramedics show up, and the paramedics broke the spell because they come in and they have this super intense energy that's really different, and they have all their gear and their suits and their stuff, and they're like boom boom, and they lift me onto the stretcher, and they're like doing all this stuff. And as they start working on me, I'm like, oh, like this is not my imagination. Like this is like something from outside of my awareness that is now coming into my reality. And then they're like asking me questions and stuff, and they put me in the ambulance, and I have the time in the ambulance ride to like grok that I'm still alive, and I'm like, oh, like I'm gonna brush my teeth in the morning, and I'm gonna like wake up and like do boring, and the sun's gonna rise. Oh my God, like the sun is gonna rise tomorrow, like, and it's just this like flood of gratitude comes over my body that I'm gonna return to the mundane world, because it was like that experience before, while I was getting comfortable with it, it was just like, oh, I'm going to live in this like chaos tornado forever, you know? And so coming back into like, oh, it's like peaceful and grounded. was just like the like I can't even describe the relief. And so by the time I get to the hospital, I'm just like cloud nine, floating like Zen master. And I get like totally lucid. And then the whole time in the hospital, I just like tell everybody what happened. I tell all the paramedics that I jumped out of a window. It's just like so easeful. They're like laughing and playing with me. Zero pain in my hand. Like I can feel everything. I can feel every little fiber and like where it's cut, and I can feel all the broken glass like shoved into my fingers. And I'm like telling the paramedics like how to scrub it out. And I'm like, yeah, there's like a piece like wedged way down there. And they're like squeezing it, and they keep asking me if I need anesthetic. And I'm like, nope, like totally fine. You know? Um, then they just have this whole series of really beautiful synchronicities at the hospital of like talking to a priest who comes visit me, and then this woman who had a kidney fungal infection who's coming out of surgery as I'm going into it, and she tells me that her whole family healed her kidney infection with prayer, and she went into surgery and they opened her and her kidney was healed, and then they just sewed her back up and sent her out. And she's telling me this like right after this whole experience that I've had, and so this all these like beautiful moments happen, and and then I come home, and then this like what happened when I came home really had it's like there's a lot of pieces that have been playing out for a long time because I came back and I was just like I just basically died and I touched the other side and now I'm back and I'm still alive and I'm like I'm so grateful. I'm just like so happy to be alive. And I come back into the house that I'm living at and I see all my friends and they're on a completely different wavelength. And like when I went to the hospital and I had all that gratitude and all that beauty and blessing, they went into like complete fear spiral and were like, drugs are bad. And this is like, we're all fucking up our lives. And my friend panicked and like called his dad from Texas who flew to LA to come like help deal with it. And they're all just in this like sunken like terror, you know? And so I meet them with my energy and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, are you not taking it seriously? Like you are not like your head is not on straight, you know? And I had kind of been in a position then after all my rave time, because I had taken a gap year before going to school. I was a little bit older than everybody. And I was kind of in this like leadership role where I was sort of facilitating things to happen a lot. And then all my friends were like, oh, we can't trust you, you know, and we can't follow you, you know, because like you're unsafe, like you're gonna jump out of a window, you know,
Because you did.
as I did. Like fair, okay. But so there's this like rupture that happened after that. And then and I can pause after this part because then that sparked me on a whole different trajectory because I was like, I touched the magic and I can't, there's a block in me being able to communicate or share or be in a vibration with all the people around me of that. And I'm not giving up the magic. So that means that I'm going to find my ways to cultivate this. And like a lot of that is going to be in isolation. And so I've like then cultivated like a lot just like on my own, which is now just now, like since this summer actually, is kind of entering the phase where I'm like, oh, I'm showing myself to people again in this like deep way and like being seen and accepted in community. So it is a full circle moment actually right now of coming back to all of this. But yeah, I'll stop there.
I gotta say, I don't know between my 5 podcasts how many interviews I've done. Suffice it to say, very many. Um, Never have I been caught off guard by a story ever that has been shared with me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, maybe. And it would make sense that it would be in the psychedelic realm, but I had no idea. Didn't know this about you. Of course, we had never talked about this.
Yeah.
The DMT Chronicles was fairly straightforward and everything. This blows my mind. I mean, the story and the way you tell it, and just, I mean, I don't think there's any other way to tell it. The whole experience is just like
Mm,
it's a little bit. I'm a little bit like, oh my God. Um,
thank
Oh,
you.
it's wild. All right. There's a couple of things I just want to throw
Yeah.
out there, and then I want you to take the ball and run with it again.
Yeah.
Um, I mentioned to you that earlier this year we had, and by the way, a lot of my exploration started in the rave scene,
Oh,
but
cool.
substantially before you were in it. It was like in the '90s
Yeah.
and stuff like that in the late '80s, and it was I don't know if I just know it to be what it was, and it was. But what I loved when you were talking about it is about the innocence
Mm-hmm.
and just going back to being a kid. And this summer, I went to a music festival. This is a shirt from it called Shangri La, and it's put on by a band called Wookie Foot, and their lead person is Mark Murphy. And in the fireside chat Thursday night before the festival really kicked off, he was like, everybody talks about adulting, and he's like, I don't know, it's everyone makes it more important than it is. I want to go back to kidding.
Yeah.
And,
Kidding.
and so, like when you were talking about the rave scene and the innocence of it, and like,
Yeah.
oh, let's try the Vicks, and like if we got this whole line of us all massaging each other, or
Yeah.
just like we fall into this puddle,
Yeah.
and we're just all there as sweet innocent kids, just experiencing the experience. And so it reminded me of that. Let's go back to kidding.
Yeah. That's
Um,
great.
and then I mean, 900 mics. I'm a student, if you will, of Terrence McKenna, which
Mm.
was like, hey, if you're going to do it, do a heroic dose. Where it's go big or go home kind of thing was kind of my thing, and sometimes unintentionally. Like
Yeah.
you would take something and it would be like 5 minutes later and you'd be like, yeah, I don't feel a thing. I bet
Uh, Let me take
you don't
another.
even give it time. And it's just like, let's just take twice as much. And then you're like, at a certain point, you're like,
Oh,
whoa, okay,
classic.
I'm not sure that was a great idea, but here we are.
The classic
Um,
move. Yeah.
it's that's just everything is mind blowing. And I want to ask you, and I don't know if this is the right time to ask, what's your hat say?
Oh, yeah, totally. This is it says original God.
Okay.
And okay, I wanted to tell the story of this hat. I could just share it briefly. And it feels it feels appropriate actually in this moment. So this hat is a product made by this tattoo artist named Joe Monroe. And I heard him on a podcast and I was like, whoa, this dude is interesting. And he's like he has a tattoo company in the UK called Impermanence Tattoo. And he's covered in sacred geometry tattoos all over his body. Wears these like Aztec gold skull earrings and like really wild looking guy. And he was wearing this hat in the interview, and I was like, I want that hat. And but as he was describing it, you know, I it came up somehow it popped up in my social media because he was talking about flat Earth, and there was something like something I guess the algorithm was like, we're gonna like trigger you with this. I've like had some explorations with flat Earth people, and like given them the time of day, I really was like, I'm gonna actually open myself to the possibility that what you're saying has some validity to it. And then the more I like researched it and went into it, I was like, I'm even more convinced than before that it's round. Like now that I'm looking at this, but he was the first person who was like talking about this concept, and I was like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense. And he was like, reality is a holographic projection coming out of us. And he did this gesture where he was like, there's a curvature to it. So it's like there's actually some curvature in the field that's like bending in a way that's different than the way our eyes are perceiving it. And then somehow, and he's like, this is the shape, like the torus. That's God. It's the original God is the toroidal field. So yeah, I really like that. I thought it'd be
So,
appropriate for this podcast.
so here's it, and it is appropriate, but it leads to a question. Here we are halfway through this podcast, and having done one already, you
Mhm.
never once mentioned God or
Ah,
a higher power or supreme energy or
mhm.
the universe kind of thing. And so I again, I don't know where this is all going, except my question, like, what psychedelics, medicine,
Mhm.
God, universe, source, where does it all fit in for you? Because it just
Yeah.
seems like it's been interestingly left out of the stories and discussion. I mean, you talk about the
Mhm.
light and the field and this and that. So
Yeah.
give us a little bit. I mean, this may be like, okay, now we've got 3 more hours to go on this one.
Yeah, yeah. Totally. No, good question. And I think I can unconsciously like veer around it in the language because it's like a triggering territory for people, and it does require like a nuance to get into talking about this. I would say that my cosmology at this point is probably most similar to like Star Wars, where there's a force, and I've come in direct contact with the force, and it's like it's my perception of it as I've encountered it. It's very, very intimate. Like it feels like so close. Like it's this light that's woven through every fiber of my being. I was just sharing this. You ever read the Chronicles of Narnia books?
Yes.
I forget which one it's in. I think maybe it's the Dawn Treader. But in one of them there's a part where usually the kids like they go to Narnia and they have an adventure and then they go home. But in one of them, I think it's the Dawn Treader, they like go into Aslan's realm before they get sent back to England. And there's this moment where the adventure finishes, but then they go into this like little transition space, and it's this whole dimension that's like made out of Aslan's fur, and it's this like golden lion fur that's like weaving through everything, and their bodies just get like wrapped in this like golden fur that's like protecting them and healing them and loving them. And then there's this thing, the last lines of the book are like, and then for the rest of their lives, like when things got challenging, they would just think back to that moment and like be like, oh, it's all okay because we're actually like wrapped in the golden light always. And that's, I think, the closest description to like how it feels to me, that it's like it's this intelligent light, but it's like it feels like the only thing in existence that's not a being, because it's all beings. It's like the fabric that everything is made of that's intelligent. And that's real trippy because it's like, and in these DMT spaces, my experience anyway, is it like, and I've found this feels like a alchemical key that I've really discovered and started playing with in the past year. And when it comes into like spirit contact stuff, because I've been exploring the psychedelics for a long time, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit to my, more recent experiences. But especially now in this past year, I've started to come in contact with some people who are more deeply woven into like some indigenous medicine lineages. And my wife has actually been being initiated into this Dagara lineage, which is this African spirit divination medicine that's like 20,000 years old from Burkina Faso. And it's one of the few medicine lineages that it was like people from Africa that were like, we need to take this like to America and like bring it to the people over there to like help heal people. And so we have a good friend who's like an initiated elder, and my wife has been being courted by the spirits of this, it's called the Wedeme, which are like the little people. And there's different words for them in different cultures. But as this whole line has started coming in, and now it's becoming a part of our family culture that we're like talking about spirit contact on a regular basis, and it's becoming like woven into our lives. It's really brought up this thing for me of it's like, am I communicating with a spirit? Am I talking to a part of my own subconscious? Am I imagining this? Is it real? And it kind of hits this like weird edge where it's like it's actually kind of a blurry line. It's the blurry line between what is my imagination and what is like out there. And I've found very fascinatingly that actually it's like the experience itself gets stronger the more you let go of trying to figure that out. The more you can drop that and just be like, I'm not trying to think, is this me, is this you, but just letting the field be, then the experience gets louder. And I feel that with God, that it's like it's very hard to describe because it's like so intimately me and it's like everything at the same time. Yeah, that's kind of my perspective. And I can share more of like my coming into contact with that in different ways. But yeah, that's my shtick
I
on God.
I appreciate that, and I respect your willingness to go there. out of all the questions, it's one of the biggest ones. And so for me to
Yeah.
just throw it right in the middle, but I wanted to
Yeah.
give us all, not just you and me, but or not just me, but anyone who's watching this, a little break from that last story.
Yeah, totally.
Just kind
Lovely.
of just want
Yeah.
my nerves to settle down and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Great little
So
interview. Yeah.
so take us into the next places, because I mean you I didn't realize any of this. I had no idea when it was more appropriate than ever to say calling you a psychonaut was an understatement, but I didn't understand how much of an understatement that actually was until just a few moments ago. Um, and so obviously, and I didn't know this about you in 2012 when we met and had you over to the house and
Yeah.
everything like that. I didn't know this about you in 2019 when we
Yeah.
reconnected at the Portal to Ascension event. But
Yeah.
obviously, psychedelics, the experience, the deeper ritual or medicinal use goes much deeper for you than I had expected at all. So
Yeah.
kind of take that ball and run with it.
Cool. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so after that experience, um, it was just a really of the many, many things, of course, like came out of that. But one of the deep ones was like this awareness of like, okay, like really nobody understands what this reality is. Like no one understands what this, like anyone who's like pretending that they have a grip on like what is happening is just completely off base. So it was like, and the cosmic giggle, what that phrase means, it's a McKenna phrase, which and maybe you're familiar with, that it's like, well, I think it actually comes, he borrowed it from someone else. I
Yeah, I
forget who
think
it
so.
originally came from, but it means this idea that like you think you know what reality is, and then it flips on its head. And then every time you get to this point of like intellectual hubris, it's like, nope, actually you don't understand. And the new level reveals. It's like new levels, infinite new levels. And and so that kind of like opened that for me. And then it really stayed. I was like, okay, that was really profound. And then I proceeded to have, there was a series of psychedelic experiences that I had after that. Including my first DMT experiences that I shared on the other podcast. That all happened after this window jumping experience. But then I'd say from the period of about like from when that happened to like 2019, my psychedelic, when that was in 2009, so I guess 10 years, my psychedelic, it was still in this space for me where I was like, I don't really know what this is. Like something really profound happened that changed the course of my life completely. My whole perception of reality is different, but I'm still kind of treating it as this like experimental oddity, or it's like something that I'm very curious about, and but this is like a side passion of mine. And then I'm like doing my work, and it was interesting because I also, a side note that I don't need to get into, I had a whole journey with a martial arts teacher, Luhan Matsus, who's in the Cosmic Giggle. And when I made the Cosmic Giggle, I was really drawn in by his world and his work. And he was showing me his movement practices that he taught me, which are next level, were really like, oh, this is a way to start embodying this energy that you've experienced. And he was actually the first person I met who was like, you're not speaking about psychedelics in particular, but you're speaking to something energetic that feels like you have a handle on some of what I've just touched, and that I can like learn from you about like what this is, which I don't have any words for. And so I started to learn from him and like absorb all of his books and like did training with him and had a whole like arc with him where for 10 years I thought that my work was really to first uplift his work and like follow in his lineage, to be the disciple of him and to be like, I'm going to carry on his martial arts craft. I thought of giving up filmmaking and just devoting my life to martial arts and to like being part of his lineage. And then I ended up having quite a painful falling out with him, a like rupture in the relationship, which I you don't need to get into all the details of. I still have massive, massive respect for him and his work and what he does, and it's so powerful. But because of just interpersonal dynamic stuff that emerged, we're not on speaking terms. But and but I needed like in the kind of in the archetypal realm of like what is the purpose of all of this. It's like I needed to have this separation from him to then embrace my own work and like what I'm here to do. But for that whole period of time, which was when we were interacting, I was like hiding in a way. I was like, I'm using this filmmaking as a tool to like put myself in the background and like uplift other people because I'm scared to show this. Because also it's like I had this experience with my friends and I'm like, whoa, when I share my magic, it's like overwhelming and people get scared and they run away and I lose friends. So it's like I need to actually hide this from people. And I'm going to cultivate this in private, but be very cagey about like how I'm showing it like to the outer world. So that was this long period of time. And then I mentioned on the DMT podcast too, I came into contact with Baba Kilindi Iyi, who was he's this African martial artist, mushroom shaman, huge black man with a like deep, deep booming voice. And he was going to all these psychedelic conferences where people are talking about healing like veteran PTSD and like researching like the molecular structure of these compounds and like hospice training and like all of this stuff is really beautiful and so valuable. But Kalindi is coming in and like his shit is just so sci-fi. He's talking about like Tibetan sand mandalas and how these monks would make these sand mandalas and then take psychedelics and the sand mandala would illuminate in 3 dimensions and they would astrally fly into the temple and meet the ascended masters and train with them. And he's like, the magic carpet is a real thing. It's like a carpet woven by the ancestors, and you sit on it and take a high dose of mushrooms, and then you fly into the spirit world. And he's like, all of this stuff that we have, these like little snippets are actually like psychedelic technologies that we've mastered. And so he has this vibe that's like, it's very like Black Panther. It's like ancient, like mystical, like deep indigenous, but like future technology like it's like he's got this Afrofuturism vibe going like super hard. And I'm just so drawn in by him. And I'm like, whoa, and I devour all of his content. He's like doing these Facebook lives, and I'm like, whoa, you're onto something. And he starts putting pressure on his audience where he's like, things are getting real, shit is ramping up. And he keeps using this phrase where he's like, the 20s are going to be the roaring 20s because like cycles repeat. And I'm telling my wife this in 2019, and she's like, okay, or whatever. And like now she's like, okay, it's the roaring 20s. Cool. I get it. And so he's saying this, he's kind of putting this, he's like giving this message where he's like, all the Doctor Stranges out there, you got to dose up, like start going deeper. And he's talking about like, to McKenna is like heroic dose is 5 grams in silent darkness. And Kalindi is talking about like 20 grams, 30 grams, 40 grams, like crazy, crazy, crazy high doses. And he's saying this shit where he's like, it just keeps going deeper, where like there's no bottom. Like he's like, it just keeps expanding to like deeper and deeper realms, like when you go to these higher doses. And he's like, 10 grams, the painting starts moving on the wall, or like 5 grams, the painting starts moving. 10 grams, the painting is then coming out of the room into your space. And 20 grams, you're going into the painting, like into the world of the beings that are there. And he's talking about all this shit, and I'm like, this is like my dream. Like I want to be a wizard. Like so, you know. And so it's right around the pandemic too, and he died during the pandemic very tragically. And I got to meet him one time at a conference, at a talk that he gave, which I feel lucky to, but wish I could have connected with him more. But I got the chance. Oh, another person who'd be great to have on your podcast. His protege is this young woman, this lovely woman named Acacia, who is the only person that I know who goes as deep as me in the psychedelic realms. And she's like his, taking on his footsteps. And she's organizing stuff. I don't know if you're connected to the Z Space in Oakland. It's the psychedelic church in Oakland. That's one of the first of these doing this. Anyway, she's plugged into that community. But so Kalindi like sparks something. And when after that happens, I start approaching it differently, like different intention, different foundational intention, where it's like now my intention is to like get serious and like to really like go in and like treat this as like a martial arts practice. Where before it was like this is an experiment. Now it's like this is a training that I'm doing. And I start really grappling with it in that way and like preparing and like treating like orbiting my whole life around it, where it's like, okay, now everything is about this, and then how do I take information out of that and then bring it to people? That's the work that's happening now. And so then some time goes by. 2023, I have this window opens where my wife goes to visit her mom in Cape Cod, and we are in this apartment in San Francisco. And she goes for like an indefinite amount of time. She's like, I'm going to go stay with my mom. I don't know like how long it's going to be. And and when she leaves, I see her off, and then as soon as she leaves, I'm like, oh, there's this space open where I'm alone in our apartment for this extended period of time. And the spirit is just really loud, like go deep, like go in now and like embrace this moment and really take advantage of it. And so I initiate what ends up being like a 6 week process where it is like basically like a 6 week plant medicine journey where I do like probably three LSD journeys in that time period, but the whole time I'm like I'm the whole apartment turns into an altar and I physically like seal off everything. It's like windows closed. I'm just like isolated in the apartment, cleaning and tending like every little object, arranging the space like super nuanced, eating very little. I shed a ton of weight. I'm like drinking high dose cacao every day and like taking a lot of herbal teas and just all intuitive eating and like intuitive like herbs. And it's like building and building. So I'm like preparing, like taking my body through this whole process to like get ready for these like bigger doses. And then it culminates with a dose that I take, which is the first time that I've gone back to a level when I had my window jump consciously. And I take 1,050 micrograms for the big one. But now from this place of like all of this learning and all of this experience and all of this preparation and creating this like immense amount of safety to ground it and to actually like land that experience in my body.
Was there fear around that just based on the
Um,
past experience, even though you had prepared and you've evolved?
yeah. I didn't have any fear of like physically getting hurt. Like I knew I was at a point where I was like, I'm physically safe, like that's not gonna happen. But I mean, now, and I mean it's like I consider myself pretty experienced with psychedelics, and I tremble every time, going every time. I'm like, whew, like, okay, we're going in. And this was something that Kalindi talked about too, that he was like, and it's like the cosmic giggle, he's like, you go in and you feel like you've done 30 grams and you feel like you have a handle on it. And then you get cocky and you go in and they just knock you to the floor. And like, it's like, nope, okay, you're still a student. And so it's like still every time there is this like nervousness that comes on because now, and I shared in the DMT podcast about how now my most recent experiences have been so blissful, like so full of light, and like not painful. But really, before this year, every trip I would have, there would be a part of it that's a bad trip, at least, encountering some kind of horrific nightmare energy and like mostly pretty much vomiting every time, like on any substance, LSD, mushrooms, or throw up, like every time. And it started to happen as I've been like becoming more embodied and landing that energy more and like squeezing all these shadows out of myself more and more. I've started to become more acutely aware of it in an interesting way. Like I did a mushroom journey in July, and there was a dynamic happening with some people in my life that was like toxic. And it had gotten to a point where I was like, maybe I can let it go. This might just like fizzle on its own and like not become a thing. But then in the trip, it was like it's all beautiful and it's all lovely. And then the energy from this toxic dynamic like enters my psychic space. And it just suddenly I'm like swimming in poison. And like the whole field is just this purple, like noxious, like sickening energy. And it just like I couldn't even make it to the toilet fast enough to throw up. Like I'm feeling totally fine, and it's just like boom, and I have to like sprint to the bathroom and vomit in the bathtub. Like it's just instant purge. And I've had that's kind of been consistent where it's like I'm feeling good, but then some energy enters and I have to purge it. But that's just the way I process energy, I guess. But so going back to this, so I go into this deep trip, and oh man, there's a lot of parts of it. And like I'm not gonna like remember the order properly of like how it all unfolded, but I start to realize, and this is something where it's like I'm now, and this is like Kalindi's method of doing tripping, where he and his directive, which I fully agree with now, is he's like when you're doing this kind of like martial arts psychedelic practice. Like you build up and you start building up. And in the beginning, like you have a trip sitter, you have somebody with you who's like helping, you know. But then once you get to like 7 grams, like 9 grams mushrooms, you have to do it solo because the other person's energy will swirl into your field and you'll get like entangled with them. And I've had this happen and it's not very fun. And and then also doing it in your own home. Like it's really different to trip in your own space and to prepare your own space and to clean your own space and like be in this like total safety of your own environment. And then what happens when you do that, like I started to realize, like I'm looking at my bookshelf here, and like as I'm going into this deep trip, I'm like looking at the books and I'm seeing how I've like selected all of these objects in my life that are like this externalization of who I am. And that my energy is actually plugged into the whole space. And now the whole space is actually like flowing through my body seamlessly, like this extension of my energy body. And I'm like moving through things and there's all of these layers and it's also like, you know, this is like right after pandemic lockdowns in San Francisco, and like the energy in San Francisco is just so gnarly intense, you know. And so this through this whole thing I'm like this is all opening and I can feel like all of the timelines. Like I start to become aware of these like multiple branching timelines that are happening. And I can feel like the edge of the veil, like between the timelines. And like right on the other side, it's like a total apocalypse. And it's like there's it just like explosions in every direction, you know, and my body is kind of going into this like panic where it's like, we got to do something about this. Like we got, you know, and there's this energy coming in and this has happened many times in my trips where like I'll start becoming a character and then like playing out like a theater scene that's like two characters that exist like in my body, and it starts taking on this quality of like, if you've seen the Doctor Strange movies, that the mythology from that was like reverberating through me pretty loudly then. And it's like this whole thing starts happening where it's like I'm Doctor Strange, but I'm also Wong, who's like this quiet, like meditative teacher. But in this whole thing, it's like Wong is the master. And like my Doctor Strange self is like, we gotta figure out the magic to fix the timeline and like do all the stuff. Like, what are we gonna do? And this Wong part of me is like, yeah, it's all exploding, but like patient, be right here. Like, be patient. This is what's important. Like, don't waste this moment, you know. And so there's this wiser part of me that's kind of like coaching me through, like, okay, stay with it, like, stay with it. You know? And then at some point, I I was also in this period. So this is the erotic energy thing is a big part of this too. Of like weave in here that as this is all happening, my wife she's trained in this somatica method, which is this sex and relationships coaching. That's like this touch-based like practice, like therapeutic practice. And we were having some issues in our relationship, and she was like, "You should go work with the somatica practitioner who's not me." So at her behest, she's like, "You should go work with the coach who's not me." And I started working with this practitioner, and she helps to like crack open my desires. And what I've really come to see, like through a lot of plant medicine journeys and a lot of things and all of this, and this is maybe I should have shared this in the DMT podcast, but it's like I really see it now that the fundamental force in the universe is desire. That it's like the Big Bang is like just pure energy. That's just the desire to be. That's just the unformed desire. That's like, I want to experience, like I want to come out of the nothingness and become, you know, it's desire. And that desire exists in us in our root chakra. And the thing is that it's like in those low places, the desire is not yet integrated with the heart, you know. So it's like the kundalini energy has to rise up and integrate with the heart to become like love. But at that primal force, when I've encountered it, and I encountered it on a DMT trip where I was like doing this erotic cultivation, and I took a hit of the DMT pen, and it was like a giant serpent exploded out of my root, and it felt like I was wrestling an alligator, like it was this huge thing that was just writhing, and it was like terrifying. and it wasn't, it was like, it's not bad, it's not evil, but it's like not good, you know? It's just this pure wanting that will destroy everything if it's just like let free, you know? And it will just like eat my life, you know? And it doesn't care about anything, doesn't care about other people, doesn't care about the future, it just wants, you know? And so this practice, I'm starting to crack open this desire field. This is this first time of this energy starting to open. And it's there's a sexual component of it, but then there's also just this like allowing myself to have these like regular desires where it's like, oh, there's this book that I wanted to buy, you know, and like realizing how repressed I'd been just in basic desires like that before. And there's a book that I buy that I have on the shelf, and I get it. It was this intuitive purchase, and I didn't even realize what the book was before it arrived at the house. And then it shows up, and it's this Dim book. And I had heard of this phrase. There's actually a EDM record company called Dim Records, and it's Steve Aoki's record label.
Oh,
And it's like from all these 80s kung fu movies. And it's basically like if you've seen Kill Bill, like the 5 points exploding heart technique. It's basically a real technique. And I start reading this book and I'm like, holy shit, this is like a real thing where people would train and learn all of the acupuncture meridians in the body and train their fingers and do this like, you know, hit blocks of wood and like do other stuff to make their fingers strong. And then they could strike you like right on an acupuncture meridian, and then it would make your organ fail, you know, or make the meridian like stop working. And start getting this really strong impression with this book here and like everything that's happening and everything I'm seeing, where I'm like, there's another lifetime where I knew how to do this technique, and I did this to people. And then this whole vision opens where I'm standing in the living room, and that like the coffee table just turns into this enormous like black lake of souls. And I have this like just like crushing feeling that it's like these are people that I've killed. And there's something about this dim mak technique that like it doesn't just kill people, it like fucks up the energy body and then interrupts their ability to like transition properly as they're dying. And so it's some sort of really terrible, like destructive force that I enacted on people. And now I'm like seeing the results of it, like in this hole in the ground in my living room. You know? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then there's like all these like like all of these like demonic forces. And there's a moment where I like go in the bedroom and the whole bedroom is just like dripping with nightmare creatures, like giant centipedes and like fucking like insects and like all of these like writhing darkness. So like all this super gnarly energy. And it gets to this point where I'm like, but something clicks in where it's like I've been down in that pit, you know, and it's like I know how to swim in this, and that like something kicks in me where I'm just like my heart starts to open. And this was another directive from Kilindi where he was like, "You're having a bad trip, but like you open your heart and the light out of your being, and everything in the multiverse will bow to you. You know, it's like nothing is more powerful than you." And I'm remembering that, and I go in the bedroom and I just like open my heart field and it's just like boom and like radiate light out. And I'm just like, get out. And they all just like disperse. And I'm like, whoa, okay, we can steer the ship like in the spirit world. Cool. And I've come to see that it's like so much of it is that. It's like, can we have this like enormous courage to actually open ourselves and like open our light and our light. And it's a funny paradox because our light is like the most powerful force in the universe, but it also makes us vulnerable when we open it. Because then it's like, oh, now we're feeling everything and like we're becoming revealed in like what we are. And so I'm seeing all of this, and there's another crazy moment that happened where I and it's funny that this was really putting the nail in the coffin with this vibe that was in me, where I'm standing in front of this little altar that's on my bookshelf, and I'm burning a candle, and I have a Alex Gray cards. He has these like big cards that he made, and there's one of the Sophia goddess that I have on the wall, and I'm like looking at the goddess, and that you know that impulse in me to jump out of the window was kind of this like I'm gonna rip open the veil, like I'm gonna open the doorway into another reality. But there's something like violent about it, like violent in the way I was doing that. And then on this trip where I've returned to the same dose, I'm like looking at the Sophia goddess and like feeling the matrix of this reality, which interestingly, matrix means mother or like womb, so we're in the womb, like we're in the body of the mother, literally in the matrix. And I'm like staring at this painting, and I'm like, and as I start to remember this dim mak thing, my fingers start to activate, and I see these like there's like these tornadoes of light like around every single finger, and my fingers are just like buzzing and glowing, and I'm like, holy shit, there's like this enormous power in my hands. And I start trying to do this thing where I'm like, oh, I can rip the veil open. I can like pull reality open because of the power that I have. And I'm like staring at the goddess while I'm doing this. I have this candle burning on the bookshelf. The candle has like burned, it's been hours, it's like burned all the way down. And I've just let the wax like melt out over the table surface. And on the plate next to the candle, I had left the lighter, but the wax has completely covered the lighter, so I can't see it. The fucking wick of the candle burns down and hits the edge of the lighter and melts a little hole in the plastic. So I piece together. But from my experience, I'm staring at the goddess and doing this with my hands, and then suddenly the lighter explodes, and there's like a 4 foot flamethrower like shooting out of the bookshelf, like right in front of my face. It's like like a pillar of fire. And luckily I was right there and like well, together enough that I could like, put it out quickly, and it was all fine. There's like some soot on the wall. But it was like, okay, like message received. Message received. Like, don't do that. Cool. Yeah. Um, and so then this whole journey is unfolding, and really it's like there's all these pieces I see about myself, and I could tell a lot more like snippets. But I see in this journey how it's like literally everything in the multiverse exists in our bodies. And this is why I'm so about embodiment, because it's like through the body that we're actually connected to all of the infinite lines of like everything that we're plugged into. And I'm starting to like, I can feel this playing out. It's like I can feel like the beginnings of the universe, and I can feel like every war that's ever happened, and I can feel like all the slaves of all time, like in every planet, like echoing like around me. And it's like I can just feel like everything. And it's like going into these different resonant like frequencies based on the feelings that are moving through me. And so I'm like, oh, as I'm channeling energy through this body, it's like tuning me into different planes of reality, like in the multiverse. And I'm like, okay. And then through that, this whole system channeled. And like for years and years and years before this, I've been studying all these esoteric sciences like tarot and astrology and Chinese medicine and all this stuff. And then on that journey, it all clicked into place, and I saw the code that unifies them, where there's like they all have these number components, these like geometries to them, right? There's like 7 chakras and like 5 elements in the Chinese medicine. But I was like, how do they fit? And then in this journey, like the spirit was like, go look at the human spinal cord. And I was like, huh, okay. And I started studying the spinal cord, and I'm like, oh, 22 bones in the skull. There's 22 archetypes of the major arcana of the tarot. There's 7 bones in the neck, 7 chakras, 12 bones in the thoracic spine, 12 signs of the zodiac, 5 bones in the lumbar spine, 5 Chinese medicine elements, and then 9 in the tailbone coccyx combined into one. And then all these cultures from around the world that have like a 9-leveled underworld, which is like Aztec and like Dante's Inferno and the Norse mythology. And so I was like, oh, it's our anatomy. Our anatomy is this like unifying key for like all of the things that we're exploring, all the diverse things that we're exploring as humans. And so then that turned into this whole thing called the Eternal Dragon, which is my work now, which is now turned into a physical tarot deck that I'm making. And yeah, and this is really like this is like my whole time of being like, I'm going to go and touch something and bring something back for people. It's like, this is my roadmap. And I've written a 300-page book about it too. And it's like, this is my thing where I'm like, okay, I can now hand this to other people, and I don't even have to be in the room. And you can start a process that will take you on a journey that not doesn't lead where I went, but leads to like your own version of it. you know and so this is really now my work is like, okay, how do I create these tools, these like roadmaps and like step ladders for other people to come into contact with this? And so much of it, I'll just say too, and then I'll stop talking. Like so much of it was just like so, like all the information is coming through so fast that I couldn't actually stop to voice note or like actually write it. So if you look at, I was journaling like during that trip and like during that whole time period. And if you were to look at my journal, I wish I had some. Oh, maybe is this it? I don't know. It's another journal I have somewhere, but it looks like a serial killer journal, you know? It's like it's like backwards writing and like, little symbols and it's like all clumped together. It's just like crazy. But then there was something about like taking that chaos and just like imprinting it onto paper that it started to just like coalesce and distill until it like, you know, turned into this. So yeah. So that's the kind of where my journey has arrived now. The main arcs of it.
I love it. I love the intense experiences, and I even more love the ability to bring it back to the physicality of this. Now that tarot deck, I looked at the website, but I didn't go very deep. It's available. I can go there and buy the book
Yeah.
and the deck.
Yes, you can go buy the book in the deck. The book is on pre-order right now because I haven't done
Okay.
a full print run of it yet, but it's done. I have one prototype here. But you can buy the deck, and for people who buy the deck now, I'll send out a PDF, like a digital PDF of the book. But also for you and anyone else who's interested, I'm doing a free lecture series on this starting on Halloween. That's in partnership with this jumpsuit group. 3 p.m. Eastern, Fridays on Crowdcast. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Excellent.
so
So we
that,
can, with the description of this interview, we can put the link in there.
Yeah, totally. It's free for anybody. And it's the first time that I'm going to be teaching like the whole system and like all of the layers of it. I've kind of taught it in ad hoc ways and done readings for people and all of that. But this is my first like, okay, I'm like sharing what this is in a big way with people.
You know, love the way it all works. I had no idea where this was going to go.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Normally, I have an idea, and
Yeah.
this was in and of itself like a psychedelic journey. I
Yeah.
feel like I
Awesome.
took a heroic dose of Michael Armstrong and just said, "Okay, take me there." I so
Amazing.
appreciate you more than I did an
Thanks.
hour and a half or 2 hours ago. And
Thanks. You too.
I'm touched deeply by everything about you, and I'm grateful for this time that we got to spend together.
Me
Um,
too. So
and
grateful for you
I'm
making the space to do this. Yeah, really grateful.
Yeah, no, it's I'm just like, wow, some of the best things catch us by surprise, as we both know.
Yeah.
Um I am Yeah, this isn't our last conversation. The next
Yeah.
conversations probably won't be recorded. I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to those. But thank you for sharing your experiences. But on the deeper level, thank you for sharing you
Yeah. Thank you.
with me and with whoever ends up watching this. It will be a gift to
Yeah.
whoever finds their way to this. And thank you so much. And I'm rarely caught without words, but you did it, and
Thank you.
it's so real and so raw and authentic, and that's what I strive to be in my life, and so to have attracted you into this with me, with you being at that level, is really incredible for me. It's probably going to take me a few days to really process everything that I've gone through in this process with you. So, Michael, thank you so much for being a guest on Psychedelics as Medicine. I look forward to more time with you, more expansion, more levels upon the levels, levels and levels. Thank you so much. Love and respect to you, brother.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. I just want to say two little things in closing. One, that's so touching for me to hear because when I met you, it's like I was still in film school when I met you.
Hmm?
And so seeing you doing your galactivation, it's like I really looked up to you. It was like, wow, you're really like doing it out in the world. And like it was like, whoa, okay. And like you're gracing me by letting me interview you, And so to hear you say that is just so touching to hear that from you in particular. So thank you. Thank you for that. And then yeah.
No. I mean, yes, no, everything in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah. The last thing I just want to say that feels like the button on all of this is like in what I was saying before of like seeing the apocalypse timelines, like just on the other side of the veil. I've been very concerned about this for like a long time that it's like, is this timeline going to be okay? And like you saying that in the DMT space, they're like showing you the gears and like the machinery of how reality works. I've like touched that, and without going into another like hour-long thing, like my sense now, like I was really worried about this timeline like a couple years ago. And where I am now, I'm like, we made it, you know. I feel like we made it. And there's still a lot of like, wow, I'm getting emotional again. There's still a lot of like detoxing. There's a lot of shadows being squeezed out. A lot of people are in fear, but like we're actually in the clear. I feel that really, really deeply. And so I just wanted to say that to close.
That's kind of perfect that you close that way because all of this is under the umbrella of the It's All Good show. And so
Yeah, guys,
closing it with that deep message
it's all
of
good.
hope and faith and everything is more appropriate than we both probably get in this moment. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
yeah, best to you. And I'll see you on the 31st.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Dream. So grateful.